Welcome to the Faba Bean Micro Summit Series Part 2. My name is Tanya Durr, Director of Diversification and Market Insights at Pulse Canada, and I'll be your host for today. Now, today we are going to get some practical perspectives on Faba beans from members along the value chain. Last week, we set the stage for what Canada's doing to support a growing crop. Mintel provided a glimpse of all the different innovations happening in the market, from breads in Europe to a whole host of dairy alternatives and so forth in North America. We had Mike Nickerson show us the latest research on faba bean ingredients and functionality. Now that we have this foundation, we will see what's actually happening on the ground. We have some representatives from companies across Canada. But before I introduce our speakers, we have some housekeeping that we need to do. And so during the presentation, please type your questions into the chat panel on the right-hand side of the screen at any time. Now, if you have a specific question that you want to direct to somebody, feel free to add their name to it and ask the question. If you're finding you're having issues during the session, try refreshing your browser and ensure that you have the press play button on the video player. So type your questions on the right and make sure you refresh if you have any issues. So allow me to introduce our speakers for today. We have Hayley Jeffries, CEO of Prairie Faba, the all-Canadian faba bean company based in Glenboro, Manitoba. Nishat Joshi, Head of Commercialization at AGT Foods, one of the largest suppliers of value-added pulses. Derek Moore, Pulse Business Manager and Seed Production Specialist at DL Seeds, a leader in plant breeding innovation. And last but not least, we have Samara Fossey, Director of Product Development at Loblaw Brands, the largest grocery retailer in Canada. So please welcome our speakers for the Faba Bean Micro Summit Part 2. Now, Hayley is going to be our first speaker today from Prairie Faba. And hi, Hayley. Hayley has her hands in all things fabas, from working with her husband growing fabas in Manitoba to processing functional ingredients. And so today we're going to hear her take on how fabas can play a big part of the plant-based food movement. So Hayley, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Hayley Jeffries, and I'm the co-founder of Prairie Faba. Prairie Faba is proud to be a vertically integrated company, and as Tanya mentioned, we are all things faba. So we like to pride ourselves from faba to fork. Some of you may be wondering, too, why we call it fava versus faba. Well, faba beans have way too many names. Faba is one of the names. Fava is another name. You may also know them as broad beans, horse beans, or tick beans. They just like to be a bean that has too many names and cause a little bit of confusion in the marketplace. A few years ago, we recognized that there was a problem with the current growing demand for plant-based foods. We realized that diversity is one of them. Only 55% of consumers were willing to eat more plant-based foods, but they need more variety. There's a healthy dilemma. 67% of consumers would eat more plant-based foods if they tasted better. And consumers between the ages of 25 and 34 buy plant-based foods to help reduce environmental impact. Only 25% of the consumers, though, trust the food system. Having said that, we founded Prairie Faba so that the ingredients can add and complement to plant-based offering for all types of protein consumers. Prairie Faba's ingredients can enhance the nutritional profile of a product without compromising taste or texture, hopefully winning over the consumer. Prairie Faba is proud to be vertically integrated, offering quality, traceability, and reliability to its consumers. As we said, faba to fork. Faba is a nitrogen-fixing, sustainable crop which increases soil health and yield optimization. Here at Prairie Faba, we sell the whole bean, everything from whole beans to split beans, which is also known as dehulled fava beans, to fava flour, fava grits, and fava flakes. Our company is kosher certified, non-GMO. We're fava to fork, and we offer low visine fava bean varieties. Some of the benefits of fava beans that intrigued me several years ago is the clean, light flavor, that they're non-GMO, they're gluten-free, and they're allergen-free. They're also high in fiber and other vitamins and minerals, and they meet that demand for plant-based ingredients. Now, how do Faba stack up compared to other pulses and plant-based proteins in the marketplace? Well, just on protein alone, they're the highest protein compared to peas, beans, and lentils. They're low in fat, they're lower in carbohydrates, and they're highest in fiber. So they have unmatched nutrition. However, consumers' demands for plant-based products have increased, but their consumption is still limited due to the presence of these off flavors and taste issues. Unlike any other primary pulses, faba beans have been found to contain actually fewer volatiles, resulting in lower presence of off-flavor compounds. In addition to showing a lower presence of volatile compounds, faba beans also have shown the lowest abundance of 1-hexanol of all primary pulses. Much like other volatile compounds are known for their off-putting taste profiles, typically described as green, musty, earth, chemical, or gassy aromas, faba beans can have a clean flavor profile. By formulating with faba, we can significantly improve the flavor and texture and not affect the color or the aroma, or have to use expensive masking agents when formulating. So the nutrition is unmatched. We know the faba has an overall cleaner, beany flavor than other pulses in the marketplace. But how does it stack up in terms of functionality? Well, when you look at the whole ingredients, faba has strong gelling and binding characteristics. It's excellent in oil and water absorption. It has stable emulsifying capabilities. It's a smooth, creamy mouthfeel, limited to no beany taste, and it's very nutrient dense. Now, what are the applications when you look at these whole ingredients that food manufacturers can formulate with? You can do everything from soups and sauces to bakery, plant-based meats, batters, condiments, snacks, and bars. And one thing I noticed I'm missing on here is even non-dairy products. So at Prairie Fava, we've formulated with several we formulated different starter formulas in all of these categories, and I'm just going to highlight a few of the successes that we have formulated with our Fava products. I got really excited when we looked at the rise in cauliflower pizza crusts, but I noticed there was an opportunity to increase the protein and the fiber. So I thought, why not do a Fava cauliflower pizza crust? So we took a typical cauliflower pizza crust in the marketplace, and we said, how can we improve this with our Fava flour? If you look at the comparison, we were able to double the protein content, triple the fiber, and reduce the ingredient by 46%. So you can see the original recipe with added gums and starches, and we were able to reduce that just by the functionality that Fava can present in a recipe like this. Here are some of the pictures from the Fava bean crust. As you can see, there was excellent crumb structure. There was a golden bottom crispiness to the crust, which sometimes can be hard in gluten-free applications. Another application that Prairie Fava looked at was a protein starter block. This is a great starter block when using our Fava bean splits to help for food manufacturers to help create vegan meats, non-dairy products, from cheeses to also sauces and more. If you take a look to the right, that is our protein starter block. As I said, it's used with Prairie Fava's Fava splits. You can create your own cheese for slicing or grating, or try it to make a smoothie, creamy dairy spread or yogurt. The advantages to the starter block, without a doubt, it's a sustainable ingredient, its affordability, its taste, and obviously its convenience to use. So oftentimes when we think of plant-based meats, we often go to the concentrates or the isolates, which are great to formulate with, but why not formulate with the whole ingredients too? Some of the benefits to formulating with Fava as a whole ingredient is the higher, in plant-based meats, is the higher water holding capacity for cost savings, high oil binding capacity for increased increasingly juiciness and improved mouthfeel, improved sliceability and overall structure due to strong gel formation. And again, we see this common theme, the more neutral flavor and color for an offer for a cleaner label. No need for expensive flavor masking. Again, overall cost savings. When we looked at a starter formula for plant-based sausages, some of the benefits were reducing the gum and the yeast content, other ingredients in the application, was cholesterol free, superior nutrition, and obviously we could move away from the dairy and egg for eggs and have a cleaner flavor overall. Here's some pictures for the superior gelling capacity when you cut into the sausage. So from everything from cauliflower fava pizza crust to our protein starter block to the plant-based meats, we are excited to be formulating with Faba in a various of applications, and it doesn't end there. So if you have any further questions or want to talk to us about formulating with Faba and the opportunities with it, please let us know. At Prairie Fava, we are proud to be a vertically integrated company that provides traceability, control from fava to fork, and we so look forward to the future. And this market is just at the beginning, and the future is fava. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Haley, for that presentation. I love that from fava to fork. I see that. You are sorry. Perfect. Okay, I thought we lost you for a sec. So thanks again for that presentation. So we have some questions from the audience, and we'll just quickly ask them. And I also wanted to mention, so you can add your questions to the side chat panel, and then we will also be convening at the end and doing a broader discussion as well. And so please have your questions typed in and keep them coming. So we just have a quick question here, Haley, from the audience regarding allergens. And so in your presentation, you mentioned they're allergen free, and there was some questions about where this information comes from. And could you just explain just more context about the allergenicity of Fabas, or the low allergenicity of Fabas?
Yeah. So yeah, technically fava is an allergen-free bean. However, we do talk about low lysine varieties in regards to favism, but technically favism is not an allergen. It's a genetic condition. So with the new varieties being low lysine and low convisine, that addresses that issue. But like I said, that is a genetic reaction. It's actually not considered an allergy.
Okay, great, thanks. And so there's a distinction there, and this was discussed last week as well. Another question was regarding the application of faba beans and in hummus, and we often see chickpeas being used in hummus. And so can you just comment on maybe perhaps the differences or the uniqueness of fabas?
Yeah, I think chickpeas are, obviously all pulses are great, but obviously I'm a fava fan. I would say that fava beans can be used in hummus. There's some more traditional recipes that use favas versus chickpeas. I think that chickpeas have made a huge presence in hummus, especially in the North American market, but there's definitely opportunities for fava to shine. We have a few starter recipes that we've used in hummus, and they taste great. There's also the opportunity to combine pulses. And sometimes there's complementary proteins and amino acids that can happen by combining pulses, like fava and peas or fava and chickpeas. So the opportunities doesn't necessarily have to be a fava hummus or a chickpea hummus. There could be great synergies of using the beans together.
Great. And then could you explain more, just another question, could you explain more about the starter block that you had introduced?
Yeah, we're looking at ways, because oftentimes when you think of plant-based meats or you think of non-dairy applications, a lot of food manufacturers go right to protein concentrates and isolates, which are still great functional and have, great ingredients. But when we look at our company and just selling the whole ingredients, we thought, how could we also get people to think of the whole ingredients in these applications? So we developed a starter block, which just offered such great functionality to be able to use in these applications where you typically don't see the whole ingredients being used as much. And it offers a great base, and it's been very functional for certain applications like non-dairy and meat alternatives.
There's certainly a lot of versatility there. Okay. Well, thank you, Haley, for that presentation. And we'll move on to the next speaker now. And our next speaker comes from AGT, is Nishant Joshi. He heads up their AGT's commercialization and R&D department. And Nishant brings a wealth of food industry experience coupled with a research background, and he really helps to drive that innovation with plant-based ingredients. So Nishant, we're going to hear what AGT is doing and what they're doing with fava bean ingredients. So Nishant.
Thank you, Tanya. Hello, everybody. My name is Nishant Joshi, and I'm working with AGT on R&D and product development and commercialization. So we'll be talking quite a bit of these information building on to Haley's presentation, which is a good connect. But quick overview on AGT: we are a global food ingredient manufacturer, global leader in pulses and staple food, and we have presence in Turkey, not just North America, but Turkey and Australia, China, and we have offices in India and Europe as well. And we have direct connections with the growers on all sorts of pulses and beans. So basically, from farm to fork, making variety of different ingredients, semi-finished products as well as finished products, including but not limited to pasta and texturized protein and whatnot. So as I mentioned, we have a good supply chain depending on the seasonal crop availability in different parts of the world. We have a pretty established supply chain of different pulses and beans globally. And this is a quick overview of all the different categories that we are out there in the market, on wholesale, bulk sale of all the beans, milled flours, and other value-added products. So I think we have covered this overview of pulses in our previous presentations from Mr. Nickerson as well as Chris. But pulses, including fava beans mainly, the fat is pretty low here, around 2 to 4%, and the protein content is pretty high, around 29 to 35% actually. So that's the beauty of using fava beans in different applications, and not just the fat, but the starch or the carb is also significantly lower than a lot of other ingredients there. Again, talking about a little bit about the sustainability and the carbon footprint, lentils and beans, if you see on the bottom left, beans are on a green area, level there, as far as carbon footprint is concerned, as compared to all other meat and other, seafood and dairy and other categories there. So that's always a plus point of using fava bean in a lot of these categories or applications. And as we know, in last few years, plant-based is a big marketing trend, or more from a consumer standpoint. For a balanced meal or balanced nutrition, people are leaning more and more towards plant-based ingredients, and fava bean could definitely be on top of this list because of their nutritional value and the functionality of each and every component coming out of fava bean. And we'll go through that. This is, as I mentioned, a typical composition for fava bean, high in protein, and the protein is basically it's pretty high in lysine. And then we have the fiber, which is, I'm going to cover a little bit on that in the other next slides, but that's where I see an untapped potential of using fiber, how to make a functional fiber, because fiber is pretty critical part of fava bean. And as Haley also mentioned, the whole bean itself, how to utilize each and every component or the derivatives of the fava bean itself. So this is our overview of just the ingredient processing for fava bean, where we have the dehulling and the splits in a process with air classification and micronization, and making different standardized flours of different milling or grind size, as well as standardizing the protein content, going into the concentrates, as you see in the center, or on the right side, you see the fava bean isolates. So we have capability and established processes to make concentrates, isolates, and the low protein, 12% protein fava bean flour, as well as the, split fava bean flour itself. And not to mention, the fiber itself, the pulse fiber, which is pretty high in, the dietary fiber amount. So we have a unique way of processing. Some of these processes are proprietary to AGT, but it's I call it as a one-stop shop to customize the customer need or the consumer need, how we want to develop a specific product there, utilizing these existing processes. So this is again another overview for granulated flours or fine flours, as I mentioned, on the grind size, or how do you extract or isolate the fibers and the protein and the starches. And these are some of those products we have available, and we are producing currently from fava bean, mainly the texturized and the pre-gel. It's a pre-gelatinized flour, or also on the extrusion side, crisp and puffs. And if you see on the left side, we have pastas and all different food service and industrial, frozen, IQF, all sorts of pastas available as well. And veggie crumb, that's more like a breading and batter, coating systems, where we have a variety of different semi-finished and finished ingredients that we are currently producing from fava bean. And now I think the nutrition portion we have already covered in the previous presentations, but it's mainly the protein quality, where we see more like a win-win situation. Just we talked about it from the hummus example, combining fava bean with any other protein. So I have another example where you can think about cereals or any other semi-finished product where corn or wheat is used, and how fava bean can help balancing that amino acid score, or the PD-CAS. And that has been a common request from a lot of our customers on the PD-CAS. And there's still quite a bit of work to be done, honestly, on optimizing. But this is just one example of the power of blending, we call it. What would be the ideal ratio to come up with the best PD-CAS, or the amino acid score that can get closer and closer to, let's say, soy or dairy, which ideally we want to go till 1. So what would be a complete blend ratio? Here we are using an example of brown rice protein and fava bean protein concentrate at 60% protein level there. And as you can see, you can easily achieve that with the low sulfur, the sulfurous amino acids coming from the rice, and other limiting amino acids coming from fava bean. So you can still achieve all the way up till 0.9 approximately on the combination of the blended flours there. So this is pretty interesting, and like I said, lot of companies have this as part of their innovation pipeline, but how do we move forward? And I think I'm working very closely with Pulse Canada and other team members there, Chris and everyone, where finding the right blend is always it's still a lot of work to be done, but that's I see as a white space for all the customers and consumers out there to replace to make an allergen free plant-based product there. And fava bean can play a vital role. Speaking of the functional ingredients, this is something, texturized protein, sauces, and spreads. We have explored, and we are we have customers using our texturized protein from fava bean at 70% protein approximately in meat alternatives or high moisture egg replacers, baking blends, all those different applications. So, as Haley also mentioned about it on the water binding characteristic or the functionality, the biggest thing I see is the puffing of extruded snacks. It's significantly higher in fava bean. And that's something it caught me by surprise as well, where my team was developing a lot of these products where, it's on the contrary, with higher protein, it's always difficult to puff or manage the density. But here, it was very difficult to control the puffing. So again, it's a unique characteristic of fava bean, which could be very well be utilized or leveraged for a lot of these applications. And we have another, beanie notes is a common complaint, and we have a proprietary process with heat and moisture where we try to make a taste neutral or almost eliminating 80 or 90% of the beanie notes with our proprietary process there. And this is one more application wise where we talked about baking. We can use the fava bean, different derivatives as well as extrusion or the TPP or the texturized protein. And on the top, you see high moisture meat analogs. That's sort of a buzzword out there. A lot of companies and entrepreneurs are exploring that, how to use the texturized protein, the dry version, and the high moisture, 40, 50, or 60% moisture semi-finished product, and make a, let's say, chicken nugget or, all these different products out there. So we are helping and working very closely with a lot of these customers to come up with these high moisture and the texturized protein samples. And I also mentioned pasta, and the last one, but not the least, is the beverages. So here is one more chart for you guys to see that, the fava bean protein isolate or the concentrates. So concentrates are typically around 60% protein, isolates, as we all know, are around 80 to 90%. And then we have the flour or the starch and the fiber. So this is where we can really customize and meet the needs of the customer, how or what kind of product they would like to develop. So, and here are some of these examples on using 100% of fava bean to make the veggie burger or the patty itself, and a clean label, of course. So, we try to balance and try to remove all the potato starch and everything and try to use our pulse flour, the fava bean flour itself, which brings the necessary carb as well. So, um, another option is using the texturized protein or the nuggets to make some pulled pork kind of textures there. So, a lot of there is a lot of interest around in the industry there on these kind of applications as well, where we are using the texturized fava bean protein there. And these are some other extra examples. But as you see on the ingredient deck, it's pretty clean label. And, we are working on replacing all of these additives that you see here with pulse-based fractions. And so at the end of the day, I really believe in Mother Nature, where we are getting the fiber, we are getting the starch and the protein from the fava bean. Why can't we use it and replace all these additives, depending on our need? And processing, mechanical processing of, could be definitely leveraged to increase the functionality of such ingredients there. We talked a little bit about the dairy alternatives as well. Pulse-based milk or the fava bean isolate is widely used in a lot of these beverages. UHT or ESL, dairy protein as well is it's challenging to avoid or control the gelatin there, or what type of buffering salt. So these are all like work in progress for a lot of the customers, including, as a manufacturer for us. But we have found decent amount of success on finding the right blend using the isolates and what kind of, other gums can go and play a vital role in the processing. And then we talked about a little bit about on the extruded products, flatbread or puffs or different kind of cereals or loops. People are, you know, our ideal extruded product would be using 100%, but a blend with corn or any other wheat-based product with fava bean isolate can definitely bump up your protein requirement. Egg replacement is another interesting area where egg wash or any bakery blends wherever eggs are used. It could be, I think, fava bean and its derivatives can definitely make a significant impact. And here is a quick example on the color, as you see on the right side, no egg wash or with the pulse protein concentrate. And so you see on the top two pictures, it's pretty comparable. When you use a fava bean concentrate with canola oil and make an egg wash or a vegan egg wash. Like I said, why AGT? We are global leaders in all these pulses, especially fava bean, and it's a complete and customized solution provider. That's how we try to put it in front of our customers for plant-based ingredients or semi-finished and finished products. And innovation and core research is our basic fundamental, pillar. And that should be the pillar for any company. So we depend or we rely heavily on our innovation side. So that's and this is a big nutshell on the ingredients that we offer on fava bean and other pea proteins and whatnot. So that would be it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nishant, for taking us through all your ingredients and giving us a background about your company and showing all the opportunities that are possible with Fabas and blending and all the different applications. So I think that was we saw the earlier presentation from Haley, who focused really on the flowers and it's really interesting to see all the variations of the ingredients that are possible. And it's almost like you need to leverage the benefits of each ingredient to the applications and just working really closely with the product developer. So we just have time for some quick questions here, and I'm going to run through them really quickly. And I'll just start from the bottom here. Is there any evidence on faba bean cold set gels like soy silken tofu? So using faba beans in tofu, in soft tofu applications.
Yeah, we have done a little bit of that work, mainly on the fermentation side as well with fava bean, and there's a lot of that proprietary and sort of a partnership being carried out with other companies, but that is definitely an area of interest for us as well, and we are let's say it's a development phase right now for these kind of products. But cold set gels, the concentrates can play a decent role, and maybe not the isolates because the gelation would be difficult to control with a 90% protein. So the concentrates with the right amount of fermentation can definitely be comparable to compare with the soy silken tofu there.
Okay, perfect. So there's some potential there. And just another question on peas versus fabas. Fabas have higher protein, but I guess from a performance perspective, are they generally quite equal? You can swap peas for fabas for peas or vice versa?
I think it depends on the end need, honestly, on the texture. The protein quality is slightly different between pea and fava. So, as I mentioned, some of those functionalities are significantly better for fava on puffing characteristics, or a lot of the companies are using this in the beverages. So, a lot of companies try to prefer fava bean isolate as compared to pea. So, at the end of the day, it all depends on what the customer or the consumer needs. But there's not like a hard line between the selection of pea or fava bean, but fava bean definitely has a little bit better functionality in a couple of those aspects where beverages or the extruded snacks could perform much better.
Okay. Well, there's lots of more discussion around that, and I think your contact information is available on the platform. And so I think for those that are interested to follow up, you can reach out to the speakers directly. So we'll wrap that up here. So thank you, Nishant. And I think this was really just setting the stage on showing what ingredients are available in the marketplace. And I think right now we're going now to have our next speaker, Derek, who is going to talk more about the seeds and the development of varieties. And Derek comes from DL Seeds, and he's responsible for the commercial variety and the development of these different varieties, product licensing, seed production of these specific pulse varieties for North America market. So Derek is going to share what his company does, and will shed a bit of light on how these seed varieties come to be. So Derek, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hello everybody, and thanks to Pulse Canada for having me today. I'm just going to give everybody a bit of an overview on who DL Seeds is, what we do, and which direction our Faba bean program is heading towards. So first and foremost, a little bit about our history. So DL Seeds was formed back in 2008 when two German seed companies, DSV and MPZ Lemke, merged their Canadian operations. DSV is a farmer-owned cooperative that has been involved in breeding and variety development since 1924 in both Asia and Europe. Their work focuses on forage crops, silage corn, cereals, winter and spring canola, and has over 700 employees worldwide. MPZ Lemke is a family-owned company that has been involved with breeding in several crop types for 125 years, and they develop winter canola, spring canola, forage crops, and pulse varieties in Europe, Asia, and Australia with over 400 employees worldwide. And so just a bit of a side note on MPZ Lemke, they've been breeding Faba bean varieties for the European and other international marketplaces since 1982. And so who we are. So DL Seeds, first and foremost, is a plant breeding company. And so our goal is to service the needs of our commercial partner distributors by delivering the best genetics possible to the North American marketplace. And so we've got 4 breeding research stations across Western Canada, with our head office being in Morden, Manitoba, where we conduct breeding and field trials. We also have a research station in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where we conduct breeding, pathology, marker lab, and seed production. And then we've got satellite stations in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, where we run a field trial program, and Nisku, Alberta, where we also run a field trial program and conduct the core of our Canadian pulse breeding program. We have over 30 full-time employees scattered across those stations, with the bulk of them being in Morden and Winnipeg. And our core crop types include hybrid canola, field peas, and Faba beans. And so something that many of you might not know is that we also have a pulse breeding affiliation with our shareholder company MPZ in Germany and RAGT Cements in France, where most of our Faba bean breeding pipeline originates. And so just diving a little bit into what we do. So the core of our Faba bean breeding program is based in northern Germany at the MPZ headquarters, and the bulk of our nursery and early generation seed production takes place in Germany, Denmark, France, and Chile. And so I wanted to give a bit of an overview as to how a Faba bean variety is developed, which can take up to 10 years from the initial cross all the way to variety registration. And so the first step is making the original cross. So you take 2 diverse parents that have been selected for unique characteristics, and you combine them together. And then from there, all the offspring of that original cross will undergo a rigorous selection process for the targeted traits. From there, lines that are selected to advance will undergo replicated field trials to evaluate agronomic and quality attributes. And so from there, the top lines will be sent to Canada and are evaluated for adaptability in our internal field trials across Western Canada, which consists of 5 to 6 locations across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And from there, the best performing material is advanced to co-op registration trials, which consists of 9 locations across the prairies, where they're compared versus the industry standards. Subsequently, the lines that show significant improvement and have unique qualities compared to the industry checks are then proposed for registration. And once registration is official, we move to the next phase, and commercial rights to the variety are made available, and the product is licensed to a distribution partner. Then pedigreed seed production begins and takes place over the next 3 to 4 years. And after that, certified seed of the variety is commercially launched into the Western Canadian marketplace. And so touching a bit on breeding objectives within our program. So we're breeding for both the high and low tannin types. So high is, of course, linked to colored flower, and low is, of course, linked to white flowers. Yield, of course, we're looking for varieties that have better yield than the current commercial varieties that are on the market. Maturity, so with faba beans, the earlier the better. Faba beans by nature are a long season crop. So growers in some parts of Western Canada can run into issues with frost in the fall. So maturity is a big priority of ours. Protein content, so of course as high as possible without giving up yield or more days to maturity. Seed size, in our research, medium range has been preferred for most markets and applications. Lodging and harvest ease, so most of this is tied to stem strength of the faba bean plant. Improved disease resistance to botrytis, which is also known as chocolate spot, and other diseases. And then the hot topic, low visine, convisine content, which all new DL Seeds varieties will have this trait. So I wanted to expand a little bit more about low visine, convisine content. So visine and convisine are anti-nutritional compounds that cause anemia in a small percentage of the human population and can also decrease feeding efficiency in monogastric animals. And so while there's a tremendous potential for faba beans in both the human consumption and feed use markets, many saw it as a major hurdle to overcome to create broad market acceptance. So in 2020, the Prairie Green Development Committee, also known as the PGDC, set guidelines that no high visine varieties would be allowed to enter co-op registration trials moving forward. So subsequently, we converted 100% of our breeding program over to low visine varieties only. And so we have a couple tools that we use within our breeding program to, analyze visine content. And so the first one is called HPLC, which stands for high performance liquid chromatography. And so what this is a test to measure the percentage content of visine and convisine in a given sample. And so an example of a high visine variety would be greater than 0.5%, and an example of a low visine variety would be less than 0.1%. The second tool that we have that we use within our program is genetic marker analysis. And so we are able to identify whether individual seeds or plants are fixed and contain the low visine gene. And so to date, DL Seeds has released 4 low visine varieties commercially into the Western Canadian marketplace. And so just to expand on that a little bit, the current commercial varieties that we have being distributed in Canada include 2 tannin low visine convisine types, Faba and Victus, 2 low tannin low visine convisine types, DL Rico and DL Novato, which is a new variety. And then we also have a variety called DL Tesoro, which is low tannin and contains the high visine convisine trait. Up and coming varieties, we have a variety called Allison, which we hope to commercialize in 2022. And as you can see, we have 3 tannin low visine varieties and 3 low tannin low visine varieties that are in the advanced stages that we hope to release in 2023. And many more to come. And so with that, I'll wrap up my presentation and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Derek, for that presentation and taking us through what it takes to register a variety. And it takes a lot. It's a time-consuming endeavor. And I imagine there's lots of parties involved. I liked how you show some of those up-and-coming varieties and the fact that we are moving towards, at least in Canada, towards the low visine, convisine varieties. I was just curious to know, just on those more emerging varieties, the ones that had the numeric, where are those, like just as an example, where would those type of varieties be within that 10-year development span?
Yeah, so those would be around the 8 to 9 year mark. And so those varieties we would have in second year registration trials, and we would be just starting breeder seed production on them.
Okay, so it's nearing the end there.
Yep, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna have some more discussion after the speaker program here. So what we'll do is wrap this section up and then move on to our last speaker. And that our last speaker comes from Loblaws Brands, Samara Fwasi. And so Samara is the Director of Product Development. And hi, Samara. So Samara, she has hundreds of new products across her desk every day. And so there's a method to this madness. And so Samara's going to take us through their approach to R&D, talk a little bit about what Loblaws is doing and what they're experiencing right now as Canada's largest grocery retailer. So Samara.
Thank you. Thanks, Tanya. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak here today on President's Choice Plant-Based Platform. So I won't spend too much time on this slide because I think everybody on the line is very familiar with who we are. As Tanya mentioned, we are Canada's largest food and pharmacy retailer. We have about 2,500 stores coast to coast. We also own a number of banners and we regionalize those banners across the country. So depending where you live, you may not have seen some of these. And we do that because of varying consumer interests and needs. So the banners actually roll up into 5 unique formats, which you may or may not be familiar with. So we have Superstore, Hard Discount, which would be your no frills, for example, Great Food, so think Loblaws or Fortinos, our Wholesale Club, and Shoppers Drug Mart. So we have 4 of Canada's top selling brands. We're one of the most influential brands in the country, and we're Canada's most trusted brand. So the interesting thing here is that we actually act like a CPG within a retailer. So why plant-based? I think, why plant-based is probably not the question anymore because it's really taking the globe by storm. Like everywhere you turn, someone is talking about plant-based. So it's going to come as no surprise to see the growth in vegan and vegetarian claims literally exploding onto packaging. I think the last time I checked, it was plus 300%, like for the claims in Mintel. And in Canada, where we're really seeing that growth is in the flexitarian population. If you look here at this chart on the left, it's 25%, more so than the vegan population. It's those consumers that are really looking for more of those plant-based options. And these flexitarian consumers, they're going plant-based for a number of different reasons. So concern for health and wellness is really topping that list. More consumers are eating a plant-based diet because they perceive it to be healthier. So it has more fiber, healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals than the animal sources they would have been consuming. There's also a lot more concern over food safety and animal welfare, especially among a millennial population. And it continues to be an important factor when they're deciding to switch to this type of diet. Some consumers are also becoming more worried about the environmental sustainability of the food that they eat. So the land and the water and the energy it takes to grow an animal versus a plant. Nishant talked a little bit about that with his chart. And then rising prevalence of restrictive diets. So especially those restrictive diets that would emphasize a plant-based platform. So think paleo. So in order to help when it comes to plant-based eating, we were really inspired to launch a new line of plant-based products that were easily identifiable in store. So we believe that Canadians should have a wide variety of options available to them. So we actually started this brand in 2019. We started with 20 products, and last year, at the end of last year, 2021, we've grown to 110 products, and we're continuing to innovate in this area. So all of our PC products that are plant-based are vegan certified by a third party. It's VeggieCert is a third party. You can see that in the lower right-hand corner. And they all carry this logo. And they're also in this new look because, again, we want our consumers to be able to quickly identify that this is a plant-based platform. So it's very distinguishable from our PC look. And we also have a number of options available throughout the store. They span cross-category. If you look at the top there, the sweet Italian sausage, that's actually made with fava bean. And I think for us, the success of this brand has really been built on the fact that these products, they taste great and they allow our customers to have the same experience as those consuming animal-based products. And, we've had some really big wins throughout the development of these products, but we've also had some challenges. The first one when it comes to plant-based development is really the regulations. It makes it very difficult for us to communicate the benefits of plant-based eating to consumers because of these regulations and making a protein claim. So we all know protein is a trend. Consumers expect to see claims. They're looking for these claims on packaging, and we want to be able to communicate these claims, but we do find it challenging because of the regulations. So I don't know if you're familiar, in Canada, in order to make a protein claim, you have to achieve a specific protein rating. In order to get that protein rating, you have to have a protein efficiency ratio. The testing methodology for these protein efficiency ratios are very archaic. It's actually based on a rat bioassay. Rats are generally not considered a good model for determining the amino acid requirements of human adults, mostly because they favor certain amino acids like sulfuric amino acids because they have fur, and we don't. So when a food has a limited amount of the sulfuric amino acid, which is quite unfortunately the case for most plant-based foods that contain pulses, soybeans, peanuts, etc., the testing is really underestimating the quality, the protein quality of that product. And it puts that food at a disadvantage and it makes it harder for us to achieve that claim. There is a list that's published by Health Canada for protein efficiency ratios. There's about 48 on that chart, but very few of them are foods that are plant-based. So I think as an industry, rather than spending time establishing these PERs, which takes a lot of time, it's quite expensive, it's a lengthy process, we should actually be advocating for alternative methods for evaluating plant-based protein so we can communicate to the consumers that these products actually provide a reasonable amount of quality protein. And this is really important. As I quickly discovered in a paper that we just published it with Chris Marinangeli from Pulse Canada, we actually looked at the effects of increasing plant protein on the protein quality of Canadian diets. And interestingly enough, what we found was that as consumption of plant-based proteins and plant-based foods increases, so did foods of lower protein quality. So Canadians were eating more cereals, breads, rolls, crackers. It just goes to show you that customers really need a way to find these plant-based products with higher levels of quality protein so that they know what sources I should be including in my diet if I'm moving to a plant-based diet. Some other challenges are fortification. So it is mandatory in Canada to fortify meat analogs. It's actually not mandatory for other plant-based innovations. So think yogurt or cheeses. I think consumers in the future are going to start to expect this. It is a little bit of a double-edged sword for us, especially when it comes to innovation. And we are working with global vendors because they don't have the same rules around fortification that we do. So it's really hard for us to accept their innovations when they're not fortified to the same standards. Labeling strategies is also another area that needs work. Many products have a standard of identity. So think milk, cheese, butter. We're not allowed to use these terms on the labels. So that's probably why you're seeing like cheese with a whole bunch of E's or Z's or all these weird and fanciful names. And it's really confusing to consumers because they probably don't understand what that product is and what it's supposed to be replacing. So I think we need to come to an understanding as an industry, like how these products should be labeled going forward, so that it's consistent and the consumer understands, yes, this butter is replacing my animal-based butter, etc. And interestingly enough, Canada's food guide messaging is also another challenge for us. It's amazing. They actually are encouraging plant-based eating. That was very recent as of the last release. But they also encourage limiting processed foods. So as a retailer, we obviously offer a range of options in processed and unprocessed across all categories. But most of the innovative options that are plant-based are processed because, let's face it, not a lot of people are preparing beans and lentils from scratch. I think there needs to be more research in this area to make it very clear to the consumer what is the healthier choice at what level of processing. And lastly, another challenge that we're facing, and a lot of the other speakers have already touched on this in their presentation, is sensory. So it's achieving that balance between taste, texture, appearance, aroma, and nutrition. And really, that's what the success of these products are based on. It's interesting because consumers actually expect them to taste exactly like the animal-based option. So think a burger. They're expecting it to taste like a burger. This is an uphill battle for us, especially as someone who's developing these products, because it's an unrealistic expectation. Is it going to taste great in its own right? Absolutely. Will it taste the same? No. And this is partially because of the ingredients that we're using and the sensory challenges that we're facing with these ingredients. So for example, again, other speakers have talked about this. Pea protein has very earthy notes. I know Haley mentioned masking agents. We do have to use those. Sometimes they don't mask those flavors. Ripe protein can be very gritty. Particle sizes too can affect texture and formulation and moisture retention. Amino acids we have to sometimes add to a product because we have to achieve a protein claim. They can leave a tinny taste. And we have challenges combining all of these ingredients to achieve the requirements from a sensory point of view, but then we also have to achieve them from a regulatory point of view, and we have to maintain consistency in both. So this is a very fine science, and one with which you need a vendor that knows exactly what they're doing. But I think, despite all of these challenges that we're facing, that the industry is facing in general, I think there is so much opportunity here. We talk about faba bean, it's a new or a novel ingredient, and introducing those to diversify options beyond soy and pea, which you see very saturated in the market today. I think we also need research on the health benefits of these new ingredients, and then create an understanding among the consumers which are the better options, et cetera. And again, being able to make those claims. Sustainability, I think we really need as an industry to keep on top of this and truly understand which ingredients and processing methods, and in the end, which product is sustainable and how to communicate this message in an evidence-based way. I think it's important too to find ways to reduce processing while making the products more palatable to consumers. And I know we talked a lot about whole food options. I know Haley mentioned those, and that's something that we're also interested in as well. How do we get to that and maybe move away from some protein isolates and fractions? And then again, implementation of regulations that support claims on plant-based products. But to be honest, plant-based is the way of the future. So it is an exciting time for everybody in this market. And we're not going to be able to continue to grow and produce and consume foods the way that we do today. And as long as we're aware of these challenges that I just spoke about, we continue collectively to work together as an industry to find those effective solutions and identify future opportunities in this space, we can really make a lasting change on how people eat. Thank you.
Thank you, Samara, for that presentation. It was very enlightening, and I love how you just bring it all together. And there's the plant-based trend. It's not a trend. It's here to stay.
Yep.
Companies are innovating. They're renovating, and there's a lot of it's a balancing act. And I liked how just you tie in that regulatory. It needs to fit within that regulatory realm. And so when you talk about protein trend, we got to get the protein in there. It has to have the right amount. It has to be the right quality. And I was curious to know, the challenges of making claims. There's just intricacies around that. How important is it for the consumer to see that claim? Like if it's like good, you showed like good source of claim, like good source of protein. Maybe there's some other renditions of it, but how important is that for the consumer to see and know versus maybe it's just in the nutritional panel, there's a value there?
Yeah, that's interesting because if you look at the nutritional panel, sometimes it'll say like 20 grams of protein and then there's no claim on the front of the package. But then is that quality protein, right? So that's really what the Canadian regulations are based on. And from our research, we can actually see that customers are looking for products that identify protein. And you can see from the paper that I just mentioned with Chris, like they're choosing sources that are not high in protein. So they obviously need that as a wayfinder. And they need that education to say, you should not be eating this, you should be eating this. And a claim is a way to do that.
Right. It's one avenue for that. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Good. And I guess one other question, there's some questions actually on flavor, and I'm thinking this is maybe relevant to the broader group. And so we'll bring that up at the end there. But just as a last question, just because you mentioned the desire for variety, and and from a Loblaws point of view, you have options out there. It's Faba beans. You had one product that had Faba beans in there. There's peas. There's wheat. There's corn. There's many sources of ingredients that offer a bit of protein. And I guess are consumers, when they pick up a package, does it matter what the protein is? Is there any work around that space?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because we're finding that consumers are actually moving away from soy for whatever reason. They have a perceived understanding that it's unhealthy for some reason. They're moving away. So I think that's why you're starting to see a lot more diversification in the market when it comes to plant protein. So your soy really was the starting point. We're starting to see a lot more pea or soy pea blends. And then I think you'll start to see a little bit more like chickpeas coming in, fava beans in the future, because consumers are looking for more options beyond soy.
Yeah. Okay, well, there is actually a sustainability question. How important is the carbon footprint claim to the consumer? I don't know if you actually showed a claim, but you had like
we actually can't communicate anything about sustainability because we don't have evidence for the end product. You may have evidence for the ingredients that you're using, but when you process it into a product or you put it into a product, we actually don't have any evidence. And that's where I think is a huge white space, and it's a gap for us to be able to communicate this is a more sustainable option. I think from a higher level, are we moving people away from animal-based eating and are we moving to plant-based? Yes, that's more sustainable. But at a product level, we're not able to make that claim, unfortunately.
Yeah. We're going to get there.
Yes, hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Samara. We're going to cap it off there, but we'll say bye to you for now, but we're going to bring everyone back in a sec here. I just wanted to wrap this portion up because it is a very exciting time for faba beans right now. There's a lot of development happening at all levels, at the production level, the seed variety level. There's innovation in the ingredient processing space. It's a time of experimentation, and it's a time where new demands consumers are asking for more and more. And so all this is happening, and everyone's juggling everything, and it's an exciting time for sure. So we're going to transition now into a commercial discussion on where the faba bean industry is headed. And we're going to bring back all the speakers. And I'll remind the audience also to feel free to type in your questions on that side panel, the chat panel, and we'll incorporate it into our discussion here. We've got a few minutes remaining from this event here that we're going to just ask a few questions to our panelists. So hi, everyone, and thank you for presenting today. All of you touched on a number of key advantages for faba beans, and anything from nutrition to functionality. There's sustainability, the versatility of all the different applications, and if you go back to the beginning, there's a lot of varieties that are still in the pipeline. So lots of things happening. And all kind of contributing to the greater good here. So I will just pose a question to all of you. You all came here today to speak about faba beans, talk about your company, and I wanted to just ask, like, what is one thing that faba beans have going for them that has you invested in it? What gets you excited about faba beans? And I'll maybe just start with Nishant.
Yeah, sure. I think I mentioned in my presentation, but a couple of the key functionalities where we are seeing some distinct difference in performance in the end product from fava bean as compared to any other peas or chickpeas. So puffing and the gelation control in beverages, those are a couple, outstanding performance that we have noticed. So
Yeah.
that's where we see, I at least see, huge potential for fava bean in these markets. And the fiber is another one. So fiber is still an untapped potential. If we are able to manage how to increase the functionality and using some processing and those kind of technology there. So yeah, fiber and the other functionalities.
Fiber and functionality. Yeah, there's certainly some unique characteristics of Fabas. Okay, let's hear from Derek from
Sure.
the food level.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, the exciting thing is that we really haven't scratched the surface when it comes to the genetic potential of faba beans. We've been working hard on improving yield and working on low lysine content, but really when it comes to shortening up maturity, like I mentioned earlier, where other areas like disease resistance, drought tolerance, characteristics like that, I think that there's still a lot of room for growth. So to me, that's the exciting part of it.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting to see the demand and the recognition of this functionality and that these crops actually perform, or these ingredients from these crops can really perform. So that can really drive that genetic development. Okay, so there's good. So keep the questions coming through, and I'll move on to Haley.
Yeah, Derek's comment definitely gets me excited too, since we work directly with farmers and seeing some of these challenges from the agronomic level. I'm super excited to see the development work that's being done on the varieties and the work that like a company like DL Seeds is doing to address the agronomic level. Because if we don't address the varieties, we're not going to have the ingredients that and for the demand that the industry is demanding. So that's one thing that gets me excited. But I do think that just the versatility of fava is just, and the applications and how it functions just slightly different than other pulses and plant-based proteins, like Nishant said, gets me very excited as well.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thanks, Haley. And we'll turn it over to Samara. What gets you excited about Fabas or pulses in general?
I'm obviously coming at this at a product level. So I think we tried Faba a while ago and I love the taste. I think it's very neutral. It lends well to lots of different application. And in terms of nutrition, I heard Nishant say today, it's like lower carbohydrate. I think as people turn to other diets like keto and stuff, that's of interest to consumers, not necessarily all the way of no carbs, but like a reduced carb level. And the functionality obviously is very interesting as well. It gets me excited.
Yeah. So there's certainly lots of advantages there. Okay, well, and I guess we'll move on to the next question here. I think I wanted to tie in the sustainability element, but we're gonna save that for a sec here. There was a lot of questions about flavor or the neutral aroma, and I think there's many ways to address this type of question, and it's not a new question, and it's whether it's addressing at the breeding level, or if it's through the processing, or through the food development segment. There's some different approaches that one can take. So I'm gonna just talk about the variety development and just all of these new varieties in the pipeline that's being developed, and they are showing performance. They're performing in terms of functionality, and the proteins are high, and the yield is reasonable, and whatnot. So it's really checking a lot of those boxes. But I specifically wanted to talk about like Canada's commitment to developing low lysine and conlysine varieties. As one example, Derek talked about how Canada is only approving these type of varieties moving forward. And there's actually 4 varieties that are in the market right now in North America, and there's several more in the pipeline. So I guess from any of you guys, like for an emerging crop like fava beans, What are some other attributes that might be of interest, or like what are some characteristics that one might want to consider? And I think I just want to tie in that flavor comment that came from some of the audience members on, we heard that flavor is quite neutral already, but is there opportunity to tweak some of that, or maybe there's some other properties that might be addressed?
Maybe I can start, but yeah, I think a lot of companies are working on the taste neutral aspect. And as Haley also mentioned, if you're going for clean label, why would you want to use masking flavors and all that? So it all depends on the company's objective. But I think as an ingredient manufacturer, it's our responsibility as well how to get rid of the beanie notes. So and then the product developer from the retail standpoint can optimize based on the right combination of ingredients. So it's a chain reaction, honestly, by the time it goes to the consumer's end. But every lot of these manufacturers, including AGT, we have our own proprietary process with a combination of heat and moisture to eliminate or reduce as much as possible all the mini notes from fava bean. So again, it's much better, as even Samara mentioned, on the taste profile as compared to pea. But there will be an inherent beanie note always there, right? So, but if you're eating a plant-based product and if you don't like beanie notes, that's kind of contradictory there. So, but I think we have a process to eliminate or reduce, alleviate as much as possible. I would say around 70 to 80% of the beanie notes with just mechanical and heat energy there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can jump in too. I think that was really well said, Nishant. I get so excited about Fava's neutral flavor, and kind of what Nishant said, it's comparable to other pulses at kind of a standard level when we talk about it kind of being more neutral. But at the end of the day, it's still a bean, and it can still have some beanie off notes or some, in different applications it can taste better than others depending on what you're including it with. So I think sometimes as a salesperson, you get excited being like, oh, it's more neutral in flavor. It's the bean without the beanie taste. But we have to be careful with saying that it still is a bean, and that there still can be other things being done to neutralize it depending on what application it is. But in some applications, it doesn't need, a lot of work to be done because just inherently fava beans are just more neutral in flavor.
Okay. Yeah, that's, I think, reasonable. Like Fabas to start are neutral, and it's really tweaking the flavor characteristics through processing and I don't know, blending with other flavors or whatnot, more so at the processing level.
I think you'd have to educate the consumer too, right? So I spoke a little bit about that. You can't expect these products to taste the same as a burger, right? Or as a chicken finger, because they have different ingredients in them. And it's all about education and just communicating that to the consumer around taste expectations.
Right. Right, that's right. And we can't eat the way that we have been eating, and these are completely a set of new ingredients that are not the same as a meat product. So yes, for sure. Okay. Does anyone else have any other comments, or should we can move on to the next question? Yeah. Okay. So, and we're getting some questions here about production. Okay, why don't we just move on here to the ingredients? So, Samara, you touched on soy. We all know soy's been around for a long time, and it's been used as an ingredient in food products, and everyone knows peas, and they've entered the marketplace in just the last few years, but it's quite dominant. So, can you provide an industry perspective around the positioning of these ingredients? Like, so fava beans are entering the space here. What is how does this compare to the other more well-known ingredients that are more established crops in Canada, as an example?
Well, I think because they're so new, it's kind of hard for me to answer that, right? As you said, Tanya, the market really is dominated now by soy pea or soy pea blends. There is introduction of other ingredients, and I think consumers now, as they're being more educated about plants and plant-based options, they're looking for that diversity. The plant-based consumer does tend to be one that does look at the ingredient list versus just says, oh, it's plant-based and buys it. So I think as they start to see more ingredients replacing soy or pea or living alongside soy and pea, they'll start to ask questions like, oh, what are the benefits? What is this ingredient? And that's, our role to educate them on that.
Right. And I guess, so there's a lot of options out there, and it's about there's that education's a big piece of that. And so I'm curious to know, maybe from Nishant, your company deals with lots of pulse ingredients and non-pulse ingredients as well. And so can you comment on these different protein sources?
Yeah, I think I would, concur with Samara as well, and Derek, as you mentioned about all the different varieties. So it all depends on the breeding practices. It starts from the scratch, from ground zero, what kind of crop or what seasonal variety those are, and so we have direct access to all these farmers and growers in the Canadian and the North American region. So that's how we try to, procure a particular pulse, a yellow pea or lentils, red or green, lentils, and fava bean. So, it all depends on when it was grown or harvested, and that's how we try to manage the protein quality and how much the seed coat or the fiber, let's say, what kind of tannins would be there. So there are a lot of those correlation there on the type or the quality of the crop itself. So it comes from the breeding practices all the way till the manufacturing standpoint, if that makes sense.
So with Fabas being an emerging crop, there's production always comes up, and there was a few questions on the panel here about the tonnage. And last week we learned that we saw, Canada produces approximately 100,000 tons, give or take, of Fabas annually, and this is a good amount of Fabas, but it is a relatively small amount. And I guess, does anyone want to comment about the acreage relative to other crops, and also just what's the future of it? This question specifically asks for the 3 years ahead of now. What's going to happen to that acreage, and do we see that growing?
Yeah, I think I can start this one off. So I think there's really good demand from end users for faba beans, but the challenge that we've had, especially in the last 2 years, was the hot and dry conditions across the prairies. So that was very, very hard on a lot of faba bean crops, and producing faba beans was a really big challenge. So if we can break that pattern and get into more of a normal growing environment the next few years, I think that we could see acreages grow considerably up into the 250,000 or 500,000 range 5 years from now.
Right. So acreage is small, but it's growing, and there is that potential.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So Fabas are a small crop and it's growing. Did someone want to say something? So no, that's right. That was just a bit of feedback. Okay. So Fabas is a small crop and it's growing, and with all these different characteristics, unique characteristics, there's a lot of intrigue and demand and interest to explore the crop, and so all of you are involved somehow in the use of Fabas, or the processing or the development of it. As early adopters of plant-based ingredients such as Fabas, how has your company approached working with the value chain to optimize results? So this could be collaborations, working with partners, working with your supplier, etc. Just curious to know just some highlights on what you're doing or how you approach working with faba beans, given that it's such a new crop. So we'll just go around and maybe we'll just do a little random here, but we'll maybe ask Haley to start.
Yeah, we really at Prairie Faba value partnerships, especially being very focused on such an emerging crop and ingredient source and new, especially in North America as an ingredient. So we've, developed partnerships like with Derek at DL Seeds, right from the ground up with fava bean varieties, and working with DL Seeds to be on top of kind of new varieties coming down the pipeline and what we can do to address challenges from the agronomic level and the growing level. Then we have partnerships that we've been able to work with large companies like Roquette that we're in a Protein Industry Canada project with, that's looking at a pea fava protein blend due to complementary amino acids. So leaning on other companies and other partners, from very large companies focused on the protein to plant breeding companies focused on the agronomics of the different varieties. Prairie Faba is all about how can we collaborate and how can we grow this market. Because the bigger that we can grow, the bigger the pie we can grow, we will all be successful. And ultimately, our mission is to see fava be famous in North America, so that we see it more on consumers' plates, and that it can provide nutritional and sustainable benefit to all. So I think collaborations are extremely important for everybody. And so I think it's great to have platforms like this and all come together and be able to talk about similarities that we're seeing in the industry. So thank you.
That's great.
And just to follow up on Haley's comments there, like we really rely on feedback from end users on certain varieties, because we could have a variety that checks all the boxes for agronomics, but if it doesn't meet the end user's needs, then it's a tough product for us to bring to the marketplace. So that's our level of collaboration.
Well, that's fantastic. Nishan, did you want to comment on how AGT is collaborating with different partners along the value chain?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of these kind of requests coming from beverage manufacturers, as well as the extruded side, extruded snacks, and baking. Bread. The dough conditioner itself. So there are a lot of these applications where we are working jointly with uh, not just the major corporates, but also mid-size or startups there, where we try to help them and customize an ingredient, develop an ingredient which suits their need and all that. But fava bean in particular is being used in these beverages and extruded products heavily. We have the current customer set, as well as the new customers asking for PDCAS, amino acid score, all the time. What is the best combo? That's $1 million question right now, going in the customer world there, like in the retail, like what can replace soy and dairy? We need and taste and nutrition always rules, right? We know that, but how do we work collectively? So there are a lot of these kind of joint development agreements that we go for with all these companies there. Yes.
So there's a lot of back and forth and collaborations. Great. And I know, Samara, as a retailer, Faba is just one of like hundreds of other options. And so I guess you guys will have a different angle here, because I imagine you would need a lot of upfront work that's done before actually testing out an ingredient. But I guess, do you have any comments about taking a chance on Faba, such an emerging ingredient that functions and performs? What is your approach, or how do you work with your partners to explore something new like Faba?
Well, we have to be collaborative because we don't have any of our own manufacturing facilities. We really rely on our vendors to bring us the innovation in this space, as well as our ingredient manufacturers. So like we're working with ingredient suppliers and manufacturers and vendors, and we're looking at all of these different options. And actually, to be quite honest, there aren't hundreds of options available because, as this group has said, we need to get that taste, that texture, and that protein quality. And that's almost like the holy grail. I think we've mentioned that a bunch of times. It's very hard to achieve that at a sensory level and then get the regulatory piece on top of it as well. And so you really have to work with a vendor partner that has the know-how. And we bring in vendor partners all the time. And like I said, ingredient suppliers to educate our product developers. And then we in turn educate our vendors that we're working with.
Yeah, no, I think the key is really to bring that all together at the early stage so that you can work out all these issues at the front end. Okay, well, this has been really an interesting conversation, and I think we're gonna cap it off here. But I just wanted to thank you all for participating in today's event. This is part 2 of our Faba Bean Micro Summit series, and so thank you for presenting, and thank you for taking part in our conversation here. So there's a lot going on for faba beans, and it sounds like balance is the key for this emerging crop, and it's happening all very quickly. And so we heard about what's happening in the industry from the perspective of our different speakers today, working in the different areas of the value chain. And there is demand for a variety of plant-based options that have to check off a lot of boxes. They have to be nutrient dense. They need to function. They need to perform. People want sustainability now, but what does that mean? It needs to be communicated. So it really needs to check off all those boxes. And so from all the upfront work that we heard from DLCs at the seed level to the innovative work that's happening at the processing innovation stage, and to all of that, the industry, we will be prepared to supply the market. And so in a way, there is really, people are asking for faba beans, and for very good reason. And there's a place for faba bean in our product portfolios. And as a crop grows and the interest expands, we will be ready as an industry. So we hope that this Micro Summit was insightful for you and that you learned a couple of things or two about faba beans. And I wanted to mention that this platform will remain open for you to connect with each other until this Friday. And you can also access a list of the trade and supplier members under the Canadian Special Crops Association. It's in the link, I believe, on the left-hand side. And lastly, you'll be able to find recordings of the faba bean sessions from both part 1 and 2 today in the resources section. And so with that, we thank you for joining today's discussion about faba beans, and I hope you have a good day.